Hi, this is Brian Lamb, and this is my psychoanalytical reading of Native Son by Richard Wright. The psychoanalytical lens focuses on analyzing the story through a character's subconscious motives and desires, and frequently uses Freudian theory in order to support his claims. In Richard Wright's novel Native Son, Baker's intense fear of white society causes him to act unreasonably and dangerously, which ultimately leads to the suffering of others and himself. Fear often drives people to lash out and hurt others because fear clouds better judgment and enables the id to take control of the mind, and as a result, these fearful people are ultimately punished for their aggressive behavior. Therefore, people should not let their fear and id control their actions, or else they and other people will be harmed. There are three major points in the story that I'll be using in order to support this theme. The first one is Baker's fight with Gus. Baker's fear of robbing a white man leads him to fight Gus in order to stop the gang from going forward with the robbery. According to Baker, him and his gang have robbed black people many times in the past, but never a white man. The story takes place in the 1930s, so the white policemen didn't care if black people committed crimes against other black people. However, a black person committing a crime against a white person would be searched for and punished severely. Baker and his gang were extremely afraid of robbing a white person. They felt as though, quote, it would be a trespassing into territory where the full wrath of an alien white world would be turned loose upon them, end quote. As time draws closer for the gang to initiate their plan, Baker ends up not wanting to go forward with the robbery because of his fear. Baker decides to assault Gus with a knife and blame him for being too afraid to go on with the robbery. Naturally, Gus decides to run away after this, which prevents the gang from carrying out their plan. By doing this, he causes the gang members to dislike him and Doc to threaten to call the police. When Baker reflects on his actions, he is aware that his quote, confused emotions had made him feel instinctively that it would be better to fight Gus and spoil the plan of the robbery than to confront a white man with a gun, end quote. Baker's fear of white people in this situation completely clouded his better judgment and let his id take control of his actions. Although it was reasonable for him to be fearful of robbing a white man due to the potential consequences, he did not have to resort to such violence in order to stop the gang from committing the robbery. His, quote, confused emotions, end quote, which were probably the primal instincts of his id, caused him to believe that aggressive action would be the best route to solve his problems as quickly as possible. Instead of doing this, he could have reasoned with his friends that the consequences were not worth the potential payoff, but his id did not allow him to do so. As a result, Baker is punished for his aggressive behavior through damaged relations with his gang members and Doc threatening to call the police on him. If he didn't act so violently, he could have resolved his internal conflict without sacrificing friendly relations with others. My second supporting point is Baker killing Mary. Baker's fear of being discovered in Mary's room by Mrs. Dalton causes him to accidentally kill her when he tries to keep her quiet. Baker didn't want Mary to make any noise because that would draw Mrs. Dalton close enough to stumble upon his presence. Quote, frenzy dominated him, end quote, causing him to muffle Mary with a pillow and accidentally suffocate her to death. Each time Mary moved, he responded with more force until, quote, he held the pillow in a grip that took all of his strength, end quote. It is evident that Baker is in a very compromising position. It's the 1930s, he's a black man, Mary's a white woman, who's also drunk, and they just got back home in the dead of night. If Mrs. Dalton discovered his presence in Mary's room in this scene, he would be seriously reprimanded due to his being black. Baker realized all of this, which produces an intense fear of what the white people would do to him if he got caught. He lets this fear unlock the id of his unconscious and of his unconscious mind that manifests as the, quote, frenzy, end quote, that dominates him. His id drives him to react violently in this situation, making him respond to Mary's movements with more and more force, which ultimately leads to Mary's suffering and death. His id prevents him from logically working things out. He could have revealed himself and explained the entire situation, but he didn't. Although he would have been reprimanded, the Daltons' congenial attitudes toward him hint that they might have been somewhat understanding if he told the truth. Instead, his overwhelming fear causes Mary and her family to suffer, and himself to suffer due to his death sentence. If he didn't act so violently in response to his fear, he might still have a stable job and he would not have to be sentenced to death. My final supporting point is Baker killing Bessie. Baker's fear of being caught by the police due to Bessie's wavering loyalty drives him to murder her to stop her from possibly giving him away. He couldn't take her along for his plan because she was too scared and unwilling. However, he also couldn't leave her behind because she might give him away to the police if they question her. He sees this as, quote, his life against hers, quote, end quote. It is clear here and throughout the process of Bigger's plan that he is fearful of being caught by the police for the murder of Mary. This fear causes his id to take control, which decides that immediate violence and aggression will solve his problems faster and more effectively than thinking through things. His id kicks in his survival instinct, making him think that it is either his life or Bessie's life. Therefore, he lashes out and kills Bessie in an attempt to conquer his fear of being caught. His better judgment is clouded by fear, which might have been able to help him in his predicament. Unfortunately, the aggressive behavior caused by his fear leads to Bessie's demise and Bigger's suffering at the hands of the court. If he didn't act so violently, in the presence of fear, he would have had one less murder on his conscience. The text makes it clear that fear calls upon primal instincts to take over the mind, which usually disables logical thought and encourages aggressive responses. When people let their fears take control like this, they end up causing harm to the people around them, which will ultimately lead to the suffering of others and themselves. Therefore, people should not let fear control their actions. In respect to the psychoanalytical lens, Bigger is utilized in the text in order to exemplify the effects of uncontrollable fear in a person's life. The text seems to support the conquering of one's fears, as it constantly shows the harm and problems that arise from uncontrolled actions due to fear. Thank you.